A very good evening to all of you. Before I begin, I want to thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity to share some of my research and that we are doing in our group. And as you said correctly, today the topic that I am going to talk about is a more recent research interest of our group, different from the usual biological gene expression dynamics that we work on. The title of today's talk is A Survey is All You Need, Deriving Quantitative Models from Open-Ended Responses. And today we are going to mostly discuss in coming 30 minutes about social contagions, or mostly how some information or something beyond information spreads from person to person on a social network. And what is the best way to choose a model to design such a dynamics. So we'll just elaborate on my objectives a little bit more, and then we will talk about, I will discuss about a proposed method, and then elaborate on that method on two different examples, two different projects that we did using the same methods, how the models are derived, and we'll finish by having some discussion and future directions. So by social contagion, what I basically mean is that, as I said, that when you have a social network and something that could be a disease, that could be a message, some misinformation, or something more drastic than that, like a habit or some addiction or some political campaign, some product, recommendation about a product is spreading from person to person. It could be a linear or a non-linear interaction. It could be an interaction between two individuals, multiple individuals, or multiple classes of people, an inter-class interaction. So if we think about the quantitative modeling aspect, and in this workshop you have, I'm sure that you have heard about most of these different formalisms that we have, and all are quite strongly developed. That the simplest one being the mathematical epidemiology, where you treat this contagion in terms of like a virus is being spread between several subpopulations in the society, and the information is being treated as a virus. Then you can get rid of the homogeneous part of the dynamics and consider it on a heterogeneous scenario like a network, where you the edges and nodes and their relative weights, those things come into the picture. You can think of it, deal with it in terms of agent-based models or opinion dynamics like models, and obviously also like game theoretic treatments where strategies come into the picture. So there could be other methods as well, obviously, and all these methods, they have a common theme, that in all these methods you have this peer influence that plays a huge role in this decision-making process, right? That integrates this particular dynamical process that we are trying to model. So if we look at the simplest of it, that is the epidemic model, say, and we want to try to draw one-to-one correspondence between the simplest epidemic model and the simplest social contagion model, it will be something like this, that the SIR model, say, right? So you all know that there are, in SIR model, we consider 3 compartments. Infectious people are there. If susceptible people come in contact with infectious, they have a transition from susceptible box to the infectious box, right? After some time, the infectious people, they recover and they gradually transit to the recovered box. Similarly, if you consider the equivalent of that in case of social contagion, it will be that suppose a new product has come into the market and a very few number of people are using that product, and mostly people are unaware of that particular product, and the broadcasters or believers who believe that this product is good, they share that information in their peer group. Some of the people adopt that and they take a transition from unaware to the broadcaster class, and they start sharing about information about the product among their peer group, right? So this is how the transition takes place. Over time, it might happen that the broadcasters lose interest or get bored on it, and they gradually die out of that very active phase, and they go to the inert class, right? So this is like a one-to-one correspondence of this information or ad campaign or something like that when it is spreading across a population. So when we have this kind of a schematic block diagram in our mind, we immediately think about extending that, right? So in case of viral dynamics, disease dynamics, Suppose I want to include vaccination, we add another compartment, another transition. We can add things like quarantining or getting chronic diseases, right? You know about these things already in this workshop. You have heard about these things. Maybe I'm interested in some demographic variation. I add birth and death. Or maybe I want to explore something much more complicated like vector-borne diseases, right? So I introduce vectors and their different time scales and so on. I have a huge flexibility in this, right? That how I want to write my model. And then obviously the methods are there. I can work out on the way that do the standard analysis like bifurcation analysis, optimal control, all the tools are there. I can proceed with that. The problem here is this, that with this flexibility comes an arbitrariness, right? So when I am creating such a model, how will you know that I'm not getting biased by my own opinions when I'm creating the model? Most of these mathematical models suffer from this criticism, right? That these are based on some arguments, and because of these arguments, it's very likely that the model and as well as the findings of the model are a little bit biased by the person's perception who is creating the model. And it might not be reflecting properly what the public perception is about that particular social policy adoption or so on, right? So the question that we are interested in is that, is there any better way not to just randomly write the model based on some arguments, but a better way to derive the model? Model means the structure, the block diagram that we are comfortable with, right? Is there any better way to write that model, not only by some arguments, but deriving it from data? So here I want to be very clear about the fact I'm not talking about writing the model and then fitting the data with it. Obviously we do that, right? We do that. We write the model, we analyze the model, and then we fit the model's results with the data. I'm not talking about that. It's the other way around. Is there any way to know that how many compartments are going to be there? How many transitions are going to be there? Is this transition linear or non-linear? Something like that, right? From data. So this data is not obviously the data that we fit. The data that I'm talking about here is the field research data that explores the perception. For example, it explores the values or beliefs or barriers or drivers, preferences of people about a social policy, right? This is mostly done based on surveys. That is the standard research method in that domain, right? So researchers in that domain, they do exhaustive surveys. They ask people around that, what do you think about these things? Sometimes you rank things like in numerical values, like I don't like it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on scale, you rank it. Yes, no questions, something like that. Sometimes elaborate questions, right? Why questions, where you, in heart out, you say that this is why I don't like it and so on. You are free to express your own opinion. These surveys are standard methods in social science research to know about public perception about a certain matter. But what they do with that data, they usually do some standard statistical analysis like percentage calculation, mean calculation, standard deviation calculation, and so on. But that data could be have much more richer inputs inside, which we don't really extract by this simple statistical analysis, right? So what we are trying to do here is that use some more powerful methods that could be borrowed from, say, natural language processing models or some machine learning models, from using which we can extract further, we can squeeze out more information out of the data that they are collecting, and which will be directly bridged to the formalism that we are comfortable with, right? So the basic thing is something like this, that we have data where you ask people around and you know percentages and things like that. You have data, you know, and that's a very strong method on its own. In social science research, that's a very strong method. They know very well how to design surveys, which questions to ask to extract which perception, right? That is a strong method that is there. On the other hand, this is also a strong method that is there, that how to write down differential equation and how to analyze them further, that we know, right? And adding control theory or adding network theory or adding game theory perspectives into it, we are very comfortable with that. But what we are looking for is there any way to bridge this gap and create this from that, right? So this is the question I'm interested in. I think the question is clear to everyone? Okay. So let us proceed. So we are trying to have a survey done, and the final result is this that we want, right? While writing this, we are usually comfortable with a diagram like that, right? In case of, say, contagion models, usually we have a block diagram where we have some boxes, some arrows, and from there we go on and write down the differential equations and so on. So from the survey, if I can create something like this, then we are good. We are on the right track. At least we have some idea of the model, and we are not creating it on our own. Our data is dictating how the model should look like, right? So 3 things are needed to create this diagram. First thing is, how many boxes, how many compartments are there? That means how many different mindsets are there in the population in which I am asking around the question, right? That is one, how many boxes. Second is, how many arrows? Which way, from which box to which box, how many arrows do I have, right? How many transitions are there? And the third thing is that sometimes, like this gamma transition that you see, infected to recovered, right? That is an autonomous transition. That means this happens on its own over time. And they are reflected in linear terms, like minus gamma I in our equations, right? On the other hand, there are some transitions, that is this beta parameter transition. This needs both the parties, susceptible and infected. Both need to be present, and then only the transition is taking place, and they are reflected by those non-linear terms like beta Si in our model, right? So this is the third thing that we need to know, that which arrow corresponds to an autonomous transition and which arrow corresponds to a induced kind of transition. So which term is linear and which term is non-linear, basically, right? So if I know this, that how many boxes, how many arrows, and which arrow should correspond to a linear term and which arrow corresponds to a non-linear term, we are good. We can write down the basic structure of the model from there. So that is our goal. And this is our method. So I will guide you through the method step by step. We are considering the very simple nonlinearity, just proportional nonlinearity. That's it, just product, nothing else. And linear terms, just this, right? Obviously, some flexibility could be added later on when you are creating the model, but the basic structure is what we are interested in for now, right? Okay. So the first step is obviously the data collection, right? And that is the starting point. And there, we want it to be as open as possible. So as I told you, there are different kinds of questions that are usually asked. Quantitative questions, which are like yes, no, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 scaling, or something like that, which you can easily represent in terms of some numbers, right? Those questions. And qualitative questions, which are usually why questions, where it's a free speech opportunity. The respondent can speak out whatever the relevant thing they want to say. So in quantitative questions, usually it's easier for the surveyor to measure because you already have a number representation of it. In qualitative, it is the work of the surveyor to observe and then interpret from there, right? So in our framework, we are open for both. So the survey could be designed with some qualitative and some quantitative question. We'll use both the inputs to create the model. Along with that, obviously you will be having some research questions in your mind. Obviously your questions will be focused on that. Along with that, you can also include questions related to demographic or some socio-economic questions which you can relate later on and draw correspondence later on. So any kind of questions you can include. Completely free survey. So the surveyor is completely free to design whatever kind of survey they want to design, including both the type of questionnaire. Now we have our data. The survey is done, we have our data. Data cleaning is the next step, right? So in case of quantitative data, obviously we already have numbers, we don't have to bother about that much, we'll talk about it later. The main problem is the qualitative data because it's a free speech, right? Everyone had said whatever they wanted to discuss about a particular matter. We have a chunk of a text, and it's a huge amount of text that we have, right? There is some standard processing things that we need to do, cleaning things, before we proceed to the algorithm. The first thing is called tokenization, where we break down the entire chunk into smaller phrases or smaller words so that the algorithm can easily handle it, right? It's called tokenization, breaking it down to smaller parts. Tokenization is the first thing. Next is normalization. It's like massaging the entire text so that it becomes more or less equivalent, uniform. For example, remove all capital words, capital letters, if you have any, right? Remove all punctuations, if you have any. If you have words like, say, same word, but appearing differently, like improves, improved, improvements. They basically mean the same thing. Convert everything to the dictionary form, the simplest form, improve, right? Replace it. It's called lemmatization. So these are the things that you do first once you receive the text. It makes it easier for the computer to handle it. Last step, stop word discarding. There is a huge amount of words in our English language which are very frequently used, but they don't give us any inputs, like the, is, are, where. Remove that, right? So remove all those words and increase the processing efficiency of your code. Done. My text is ready. This is my corpus. We'll process it later on. The quantitative data we still have, and we have not done anything with that yet. Now we will proceed to the next step and use that. The first step is identifying the boxes. The 3 questions, remember? Boxes, arrows, linear or nonlinear. These are the 3 questions we are looking for right now. The first question is boxes, and we'll use the quantitative questions for that. So we'll use something called hierarchical clustering. Let me just spend 1 minute here to explain what this is, right? Clustering is a method which we call an unsupervised learning method. And why unsupervised? Because you don't really know any categories in the first place, right? You find features and you clustered them together. Let me give you an example. Suppose I give you 100 photographs. Some of the photographs are of cats, some are of dogs, some are of fishes, some of are dolphins, right? And I give you all the photographs, but I don't give you any baskets marked cats, dogs, dolphins. I don't tell you that what are the photos, right? I just give you the photos and told you that cluster them, right? Look for the features and cluster them. So the simplest thing that you can do is you can tell me, ma'am, all have same 2 eyes. I keep all of them in the same cluster, right? One feature matches, everyone has 2 eyes, so you put them in same cluster. That's the trivial solution, obviously. That's a solution, one way of clustering, the trivial extreme one side. I said, okay, proceed further. If you can do better than that, then you proceed and see that some of the pictures you see something which walks on ground, has 4 legs, a tail, 2 ears, right? You put those photos together. And some of the photos you have things which have fins and usually are in water, you put them together, right? So cats and dogs, you don't know which are cats and which are dogs. You are just clustering, right? So now the pictures of cats and dogs should be in one cluster and fishes and dolphins should be in other cluster. That is another way of clustering. So from one cluster, you now are at 2 clusters. I said, okay, if you can do better than that, proceed. Then you again look for features, and at one point you will have 4 clusters, right? Again, if you want to proceed further, and you started with n number of photographs in the first place, at one point, obviously, you will reach with n clusters, right? Because every cat is a little bit different from the other cat, right? That is another trivial extreme, okay? So one side you have just 1 cluster, one side you have n number of clusters. This tree-like structure, which you can imagine, right, is the hierarchical clustering, that you gradually go on clustering them based on the features that you see. But you don't know at any time that these are cats or these are dogs or these are the features that I'm looking for. You just find common features, right? So this is called unsupervised. That is why it's unsupervised. You are just looking for common features. You are not just looking for some feature. Some feature is not mentioned. That is why it's unsupervised. This is a tree-like structure, and this is called hierarchical clustering. This is what we are going to do with the responses of our quantitative questions. Now, we don't have photographs here. What do we have? We have responses, right? Responses where numbers are there. Suppose yes, no question. You can easily map it to zeros and ones, right? Some scaling questions that how much do you like it? Scale it, give it star, 1 to 5 star. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or something like that. You have numbers already. So what do? Suppose you have n number of people, say 400 people have answered to your surveys, right? For each person, you will have a vector. How long the vector is going to be? How many questions you have asked. So suppose you have asked 12 questions, 12 quantitative questions to everyone, right? So it will be a 12-dimensional column vector. Each element is their response to that particular question, okay? So you have a 12-dimensional feature vector, we call it a feature vector in a 12-dimensional space for every individual who have responded to your survey. So you now have 400 feature vectors, right? These are your objects now. Instead of photographs, now find common features in them, right? So you will plot them in a 12-dimensional feature space and define something like a distance metric. The distance metric you can choose, how to figure out the distance between two vectors. Any way you can define it, there are different ways to define it. You can choose whichever way you like, and then you start clustering. Obviously, you will start with the trivial solution when all of them are in different clusters, right? Then gradually you will find them together, which are belonging to which cluster. And you will obviously, the final step will be all of them belonging to the same cluster. We are not interested in either extremes, but in between somewhere, right? Depending on which question you are asking, you will decide where to stop, right? So I will show you and you will see it's not that difficult to decide. For example, this is the result that you will get once you do this categorical vectorization and the hierarchical clustering with your feature vectors. This is called a dendrogram. What does it mean? On the top, you have just a single cluster. In between the two lines that you see, there are two clusters. Then 1, 2, 3. Yeah. So 1, 2, 3, 3 clusters if you stop the process here. There is no where you can have 4 clusters. See? If you choose somewhere here, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. After 3, you have 5, right? 5 clusters. Beyond that, you have much more and it makes the thing complicated and messy. So that means you can either choose 3 boxes to begin with. What are these? These are answers to questions, right? That indicates different mindsets, right? So you can choose 3 boxes, 3 compartments to begin with, or 5 compartments to begin with and start modeling, right? So this is the step where you get your subpopulations. How many different kind of mindsets are there based on the research question that you have asked? Okay? So 1, 2, 3 or 5, depending on how you want to answer. You can choose both, which way you want to proceed. Okay, fine. So the number of boxes is sorted. Next is the transitions. So for transition is a bit more tricky. For that, I need that clean data that I have kept aside, the one that I have cleaned and removed or capital letters and punctuation, that we will use. There are several methods that we can use. I just mentioned some which are, I found that they are very handy and they gave very good results. Obviously, there are other methods as well. Let me just quickly tell you what these are. This is parts of speech tagging. It tells you that which words are verbs and which words are nouns, and you can get an idea of a sentiment from there. Sentiment analysis, maybe you have heard of this term. It's a positive sentiment or negative sentiment they have, right? This is the first step for that. Term frequency, very straightforward. Which term keeps on occurring very frequently in the responses? Word graph, which word comes frequently with another word, right? It's like association. So whenever this word comes, that word also comes. So you draw a graph out of it. This is another method. This one is very interesting and very helpful also. This is called latent Dirichlet allocation, or in common terms, you can call it topic modeling, right? What it does is, it gives you a bag of words which are coming together in the answers of the same question of different people frequently, right? So how do we calculate it? Any random set of words, what is the probability that they come together in an answer? And what is the frequency of this particular set of words coming together in an answer when a question is asked? The same question is being asked to different people and they are frequently mentioning the same words. That means what? That means they are trying to talk about a certain topic, a certain theme, right? That is, they are trying to indicate. So this basically kind of takes this huge chunk of text. Suppose 500 people have answered to 8 questions. That is a huge chunk of text to say 12 or 15 topics. Which are the major things that have been discussed during this question answer sessions, right? This is very helpful. So using these inputs, and I will show you in detail in the example that how it's done, we get to know how the transitions would look like. And once we know the transitions, rest is simple, right? We know the compartments, we know the transitions. Now just write down the model and analyze it, right? So quickly let us go through an example. The first example is related to viral marketing. You can find the details in these references, but let me just elaborate on it a little bit more. So what is viral marketing? Viral marketing is that it's a word of mouth marketing, right? Suppose a new product has been launched and the company gives you some incentives, like say extra space, e-cash, promo code, something like that. If you can bring some friends in as customers to the company, it happens. We all know this happens, right? So, and it's a very successful method of marketing because there is nothing that you spend. Sorry, I'm way beyond, so I'll take some time. Can I take 5 minutes more? Okay, okay. So, yeah, so this is what they do, and it goes on as a referral system, right? So obviously there are believers or users or customers, existing customers, who bring the unaware people into it. So it's already in a track of a referral system, which is kind of like a contagion. So we wanted to study that, and we did a survey. 484 participants, we asked them questions. 8 quantitative questions were there, 6 qualitative questions were there. Once we analyzed, this is the same dendrogram that I showed you as example. This is the same result that we have here. You can see there 5 populations could emerge, or 3, right? When we analyze the result, their answers, what we saw here is that the middle one are the unaware people who said, I don't know that any viral marketing is going on, something like that. On one side, these people are the broadcasters who are saying that I have the promo code and I am giving this promo code to the friends and I am having some benefits from there. There are other 3 clusters who are not using it right now, right? Some of them are very rigid. They said they are worrying about their privacy and they are worrying about spamming and things like that. They said, I don't use things like that. I am not interested in that at all. They are very rigidly inert. One is casually inert, right? They used for some time, they got bored, they left it out, something like that. One subpopulation who were very much interested to use, but they forgot. So how do we know that? From topics. So from their answers, we see that when these people answer their question, words like forgot, remind, friend, things like that come frequently in their answers. While when these people are answering the question, in their answers, words like spam, security, privacy, words like that are frequently coming. So from there you get an idea that which subpopulation belongs to which kind of. Now if we want to model with 3 boxes, then you can have unaware, broadcaster and inert, but keeping in mind that inert is a bit variability there. So variability means probability of transition would be there. There will be a probability that they will transit to the next step, right? Now for transitions, we did the similar kind of analysis as I mentioned, and wherever we got terms where friends or my brother reminded me or things like that, that means that is not an autonomous thing, right? Someone induced that transition. That means it's a nonlinear transition. Whenever you have words like bored, I got bored. So it's an autonomous transition because it happens on its own. We run a small classifier and we did a classification on that which answers correspond to autonomous and which answers correspond to induced. From there, gradually we build up the models with arrows and we are sorted. So we have this structure. As soon as we have the structure, we can immediately write down the equation. As soon as we write down the equation, we are good, right? We can now figure out the all the things that we want to do, we can proceed with that, right? So, for example, this model gave rise to a very nice bifurcation and showed that if the peer influence increases, the reminder thing, if it increases, then there is a possibility of having the viral state, achieving the viral state even below the reproduction number 1. So there is a possibility of that, and that happens because of these reminders. And we all know that companies try to do that, retargeting, right? Once we are serving Amazon for a product, then we go somewhere else, reminder, right? And we also saw that this reminder, when it comes from a peer, from a friend, it is taken much more with trust compared to it's irritable when it comes from a company. That kind of things also we have observed. So this data is very rich, and we are just taking a small amount of information from there to construct the contagion models. But there are several inputs. I'm not going into detail of this. This is on vaccine hesitancy, another study. There also, it's a large survey, and we found nice results, similar kind of analysis, 4 compartments here. And there, I just want to finish by saying that in vaccine hesitancy also, beyond the thing that I have already mentioned, we've done that, we have found the model and everything. Beyond that, some very interesting features we found. For example, in one topic, we found some very impatient people who are infected, who got infected, but they are very extrovert and they don't want to be quarantined at all, right? They know it will harm other people, but they still want to go out. People like that. Or this is also important. T15 we saw, people are interested to take vaccine only if it is free. They are not interested to pay $1,000 for it. If it is free, they will take it, otherwise they will not, knowing that there is a risk. So these kind of features, we think could be very well mapped and integrated into the framework in terms of game theoretic approaches with the model that we have, right? So we are on that way. This is a still work in progress. So we are trying to, similar for the spam. We never asked about spam in any of our question, but that came out, that emerged out. This shows another same thing was availability of vaccine. When we started the survey, vaccines were abundant, right? Because during the COVID, it happened that after a certain point in time, there was a huge demand of vaccines, and then people were rushing for the vaccine, and the availability things started, right? That it was not available. So in our questionnaire, availability was not mentioned. It emerged from the responses. Here comes the interesting thing about bias. When I designed the survey, I didn't know that availability will be an interesting thing to look for, or I didn't thought of, I know about spams, but when I created the survey, I have not cared to put a question about spam, right? But it came out. And this is good about the experiments, that you have this input from the data and you can integrate it in the model. So it's a work in progress. As I said, I'm completely open to suggestions. So I will stop by saying that there are many things that we can integrate with the models and proceed to look for interesting features. And I have already exceeded time, so I will thank and go for questions. Thank you.
So I have two questions. First is that why did you go for unsupervised learning? You could have even gone for supervised, because like binary classification of that, or if there are multiple options, more than that.
Right.
And okay, yes.
No, okay.
The second question is, and one of these, when you mentioned about POS tagging, so there you wrote hidden Markov model. But what I feel is writing this essay, it is actually non-Markovian, because what I write in this sentence will be dictated by what I wrote 2 sentences ago, and it will further dictate what I will write in 2 sentences later.
Right.
So why that Markov term is coming
into the picture? Okay. So first thing is about supervised. The same thing, we didn't want it to bias it. If I ask, in the first place, I say there are 3 classes and you segment it among 3 classes, I am restricting it that I can only have 3 classes, right? Unsupervised means the data dictates it, that how many classes. That is why all the frameworks that we have chosen here are unsupervised, starting from the clustering to LDA. LDA is also unsupervised. Everything is unsupervised, so that it evolves on its own, so that the data can dictate, right? That is the first thing, that why we have chosen mostly unsupervised frameworks. We have only chosen supervised framework once, where we classified between autonomous and induced, because we know that these are the 2 options that I have. I know that either this transition, I am allowing that much only, right? That either this transition is autonomous or this transition is induced. That is why there I can go for supervised, because I know the options. Now the answers will be classified between, the topics will be classified between either autonomous or induced. So that is the only supervised framework that we used. Rest of it is unsupervised to make it more data driven. That is the first thing. About the POS tagging, it is still a very evolving subject, right? There are different methods that are being tried to do this more properly. As you said correctly, hidden Markov models can only be used if you break down, when you are tokenizing the thing, you are breaking it down and you are losing all memory, that what is the last thing you are only focusing on the words. If you are only focusing on the words, then hidden Markov models are okay. And if you want to look in terms of context, right, that if you want to include that, then the entire method has to be changed a little bit, because whatever we did it in terms of words. Obviously, it's a very new thing that we are proposing. There are still lots of rooms for improvement. Context we have not taken into account. That's true. That if I am saying this, then 2 sentences before, 2 sentences after, I'm not even talking about sentences here, only words. We have done only up to this in this point in time.
Hello. Yeah. Thanks a lot for a wonderful talk. I was curious, or maybe I missed this. So you could very nicely make the categories. so you can get to the compartments one. But and you did mention that you can kind of figure out if some of the interactions, so for the rates, if they are nonlinear or not. But was it possible to then actually quantify them?
No.
Or
no.
is there ways to get to that from this data?
In this framework, we are not looking for quantifying the rates, because quantifying the rates can be easily done by fitting the model to the data. If I have an epidemic going on, I have the data. If I fit it, then I can get the parameter values exactly. What I am concerned here is about how to write the model, which are the terms that I need to take and which are not. So we are not quantifying the parameters, any parameter. We're just considering that either linear or nonlinear interactions are there. Is this linear or is this nonlinear? That's it, right? After we develop the model, we will fit it and figure out the parameters. Thank you.
So if you have a population, for example, it's in a community, and just sample some, individuals there, and from there, if you have a longitudinal survey, for example, for some time span, then probably you can find out this rate or something.
There are several
Otherwise,
ways to improve this, and figure out. If I say I restrict the survey in an organization and I frequently survey the same population, I can see how their intentions are changing over time. I can plot that and do that. So both these surveys were very randomly chosen. Usually, both the surveys that I mentioned, usually the participants were not known to each other. They are mostly independent of each other. And that's why there is no correlation in that sense. But it's just a study of perception, that what are the factors, what are the major beliefs, what are the major values, major drivers, major barriers, things like that. Thanks for the suggestion.
If there are no more questions, let's thank Sayantari for a really interesting talk.
Thank you.